Okay, so I think we're back. It looks like it's lagging. Streaming, guys, what can I say? I might just honestly just switch just to Twitch anyway. Because it's like buffering super bad. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Alrighty. Let's go ahead and get into this. So, welcome to Cosmo's Astrogem Talk Show. This is your girl Cosmo. Let's go ahead and get started with this show. I am like, it don't matter. Okay. So last week we talked about Lilith. And the reason why I wanted to talk about Lilith is because Lilith is, I feel like, is the best representation of women. And not necessarily because of the ruthlessness, the darkness, because we all have shadow selves, but it's more of like it encaptures the first lady, the first woman created. I'm not Christian, but I did find that fascinating that Adam had a wife prior to Eve, prior to Eve. Now we're going to be talking about Adam. But really, what we're going to be talking about is Mars and how I use that in my tarot readings or in my my chart readings. What I look for, what that means, and pretty much kind of playing around with that planet, like getting a better idea as to what that what Mars energy really is. So I have broken it down into a couple different segments. We're going to touch every last one of them. All right, and I love my title too: the man, the animal, the force. Okay. Mars is your bank clerk, is your taxi driver, is your gardener, is your boyfriend, is your brother. So, what is Mars? Let's just jump straight into it. What is Mars? Well, first of all, astronomically, Mars is the fourth planet from the sun. It's also referred to as the red planet. It is also the second to smallest planet after Mercury in the solar system. Pluto, I guess, is no longer considered a planet. He is considered a dwarf planet, but considering that planet is no longer considered amongst the planets. Mars is now the second to last, or the second to smallest, second to smallest planet. But what is Mars in astrology? What is Mars in your birth chart? Well, Mars is the indication where your masculine energy is. Like how do you use your masculine energy really is how I look at it. How to use your masculine energy, how do you receive masculine energy? Like what are components of masculine energy receptive? Because even with masculine energy or feminine energy, there is a give and take to it. There is a feminine, masculine energy about masculine energy and feminine energy. I feel like they're like subcategories. But the base use of things is give and take. So with Mars, I feel like with Mars, with Venus, with any of the planets, there is a give and take. So with Mars, like if you think about it too, which I'll talk about a little later about yin and yang, like there's always a component of feminine energy with every energy. Energy is not clean. It's not pure. It's not just that. It's never just that. There's always something intertwining it. So there is always going to be a give and take regards to masculine energy, feminine energy, and like messages, communication, of course, right? All the planets have a give and take system. So with Mars, we're not just going to be talking about how you output energy, because Mars is about the output, is the physical, is the action based, the doer. We're also going to be talking about how you receive masculine energy. What about masculine energy do you filter out and you use for yourself, and how masculine energy or how Mars can also pinpoint your libido, your drive, what sparks those things, what do you do when you are hype, right? And then going from there. Hey Jane, hey girl. Okay, so it's one of my girls out here. She just popped in. All right, so Mars mythologically, he actually, I had to do a little bit more research because I found it very interesting. When I looked him up, I'm like, okay, what is the god represented? Like the mythological gods. Like he's not, like Mars is not necessarily a god, but we always attribute gods to the stars. So and especially with astrology, star gods, those kind of correlate. And I really, I feel like when it comes to astrology, having a base knowledge of theory and myth helps. Only because it helps to define what Mars or what planet you're trying to look at. It helps define what their definitions are. So I feel like screw that. No, sorry, not that. Excuse me. When I was looking at Mars, I found something interesting. There was Mars, the second to most important ruler next to Jupiter in Greek mythology, and then there's Aries. Now I know what y'all thinking. Who is Mars and who is Aries? Because we thought that we all knew that Mars was ruled by Aries, the god of war. Here's what's interesting. Mars is actually started out being the god of agriculture. Okay? And the god of agriculture is someone, it talks about fertility, vitality. It's the beginning of spring, right? He was the beginning of spring. The story behind that actually has to do with the fact that, I guess, Jupiter and Zeus, I believe, are like pretty much the same thing. They kind of correlate. Ain't no worries, Jane. Ain't no worries. They kind of correlate between the two. And so I guess Jupiter, being the dude that he was, went ahead, created a daughter out of his own mind. He just was like, gave birth to a kid through his brain. So Juno, his wife at the time, was pissed. Absolutely not happy with that. So what she did was she went to, who did she go to? She went to Flora, the goddess of vegetation, and Flora gave her a flower that would create a child from immaculately. So she was able to have her child, Mars, without Jupiter. And then the birth of Mars was through a flower. So that flower is the representation, or what gave Mars the initial title of being the god of agriculture, because they believe she had that around Mars, or really his birth was actually the birth of March, the beginning of spring. So, which is why Aries is always the end of March, right? That March is the March baby. Towards the very end of March, because they are also represented by Mars, formerly known as the god of agriculture. But as time moves forward, it also, that spark of springtime, or that beginning of springtime, also was the resumption of war. So that means that war picked right back up where it left off back when it was last closed in October 19th. So Mars comes up twice in a year, according to the Greek mythology. Meaning, the reason why is because, one, the beginning of March, the beginning of spring, the resumption of war, the beginning of crops growing and things coming back to life, the revitality of things. And then we have the last, the last March celebration, which is everything being put to bed, everything put to rest, 19th of October. And it's kind of funny because my birthday is literally a day before that. So I found that rather interesting, but I feel like it also helps to explain why Mars is such a doer. Why is everything it's always focused on progress and growth and doing something. Is because the second that Mars baby came out, everything started to grow. And now it's interesting that they paired him with March in the beginning of spring, when Ceres is literally the season, spring and summer, as well as her sadness is represented with fall and winter. So I find that really interesting, but we'll get to Ceres later on. But the thing is about Mars is that he became god of war. Mainly, I believe from what I've researched too, is because they didn't really like Aries that much when he was the god of war. He was the original god of war. Aries was obsessed with bloodshed and fighting. He was just obsessed with it. He loved doing it. He loved slicing people's heads off. He liked cutting people's arms off. He liked, dangling somebody's finger in someone's face and then like saying like, "Hey, I bet you wish you had these." Like, he's crazy. He was a crazy dude. Mars, I don't really understand what made him so different, other than him being the god of agriculture, and they favored him more because he was Zeus's kid, or not really Zeus's kid, but Juno's child. They just favored him more because he was not as aggressive. I mean, he was just like, yes, it was about action and growth, but he wasn't about all that bloodshed until later on. I guess he kind of built the bloodlust. He built that bloodlust later on. But what's interesting about Mars is that he actually, like I said, started out as the god of agriculture, became the god of war, but Ares was still the god of war at the same time. So what is Mars? Mars is the astrological representation of masculine energy, as well as being the fourth planet of the sun, referred to as the red planet. Second to smallest planet after Gemini, after Mercury rather, and Mars has got some interesting backgrounds. He's got some interesting backgrounds. On Mars, when I was trying to look up information in regards to relation to Mars the god and Mars the planet, there really wasn't much much tied to it. As a matter of fact, like, no one really clarified whether or not Mars is ruled by Mars's representation of him is either through Mars or through Ares. But I kind of feel like they're in tandem, in the sense of Mars being the planet itself, and then Ares being the sign Ares. So it's almost like that. But the weirdest thing is that the energy that Ares has is from Mars. But Ares was pre-existing prior to Mars' existence in the story of mythology. So it's like, which one comes first? Does Ares come first, or does Mars come first? That's the confusion and the mystery of all of this. Now, what I want to also talk about is I want to go into the mythological representations of Mars, right? And the stories that I found for Mars, and I'll also note and say where I got my sources from, as well as as far as these stories go. And one of the biggest things is that, which was I'm going to read a quick passage from an article that Mark Cartwright wrote on www.ancient.eu. And this was published January 16th of 2014. So he writes as the understanding and the mythological focus of Mars, the actual god, not the planet, and not necessarily connecting it to Mars, the planet, because of course this is about mythology. And when you kind of go into mythology, they don't really, like, astrology is the part where is the mindset going in, knowing that you're going to be taking the story from the myths that you hear and applying it to your chart. So that's what I'm doing. But here's what he says. Mars was considered the father of Romulus and Remus, the mythical twins founder of Rome. According to the story, their mother, the Vestal Virgin, Rhea Silvia, was raped by Mars while she slept, and in her dreams she had a vision where she dropped a hairpin into the ground, and from which there sprang two twin trees, which were her sons. Over time, one of the trees grew so large that it covered the entire world with its shade, a reference to the ultimate success of Romulus and the growth of the huge Roman Empire. So it's kind of interesting that he had these two kids. I find it also interesting that he actually forced himself upon the Vista version, and it's interesting too because Vista is an asteroid, I believe, for your birth chart, but it talks about the fire that belongs to you, because the Vestal versions actually, what they did in their time, which I'll touch on the subject again some other time when I want to refresh my facts and everything too. But from what I've understood is that Vestal virgins actually had the option to have sex with people, but they'd be thrown out. They were women that were empowered through their abstinence rather than them being deterred from sex because of the idea of lack of value, or they're losing of value. So the Vistal versions, they could do whatever the hell they wanted to do. I think. But I believe too, if they did decide to have sex with someone, I think they would get killed. It's weird. I have to look that up again. So the fact that Mars had even had kids with Rhea Sylvia is kind of like shocking to me, mainly because I never seen Mars as the god of agriculture to go in to force himself, but it kind of gives the vibration of negative masculine energy, the force, the push, the constant, adamant, persistent going for it. And I'd say negative because it's not. I don't necessarily believe that it's a bad thing, but it does have consequences to them. They do have, circumstances where things will play out to respond to the negative action. So forcing himself is also something that we'll talk about later on too. Goes into the explanation a little bit further into masculine energy. What I find interesting about astrology too, when it comes to birth charts, is that they, like with Mars and all this, like we get the full breakdown. We get when he's abused people, when he's actually been very great and has helped people grow crops and help people with war. Like when they preyed upon them, he helped them. Like there's things that he has done, and then all the things that were not necessarily as gung ho about. He's done all these things, but they're also broken down into little itty bitty pieces with all the asteroids that have correlation to Mars. So it's interesting that we're getting the full picture of Mars, and then from what I know about the asteroids like Eros, like the sexual raw energy of Eros and Nessus, there are like negative embodiments of, or they're not negative embodiments, but they're the negative energies, or the feminine energies of Mars. And I feel feminine energy, I say feminine energy very carefully here with Nessus, especially because Nessus necessarily doesn't have to, I don't believe he has necessarily a feminine attribute to them. Eros does, and to me, mainly because it's just so tied with sex and the intimacy of what Eros can represent. But with Nessus, negative is the biggest thing I would say, mainly because it is the aggression of what Mars can represent. So, I find that with this Mars representation too, the correlation between the god of war Ares and the correlation between Ceres with the goddess of spring and summer. I feel like those work in tandem to kind of give us a better idea as to what masculine energy can really mean, how we can apply this to our birth charts. Now, the second one I want to read is Mars and the relation and how he became to be, right? Which is from what is my source? Because I forgot to add the source in there. Because I was looking up the difference between gods, and I didn't even know, honestly, that Jupiter was considered a god. Jupiter, Neptune, Mars, and Juno. And Mercury, even, of course. Like, we already kind of had an idea of Mercury, but Norse mythology considers Mercury as Loki, and that's a totally different mythology, too. And I was actually trying to look up what other representations representations of masculine energy in different cultures brought out Mars, which I had a hard time finding. Mars energy or masculine energy, and that was a little bit difficult to find for me, but which I'll get the source to this later, but pretty much what I said with this snippet is pretty much how Mars was born. His mother ingested a flower which from the goddess of Flora, and she therefore created a child through her own means. And I find that this gave Mars full control of masculine energy completely. And it's weird, and it's from it's a derivative of a woman. So I feel like also considering if you look at the story for Jupiter and Juno and how they conceived their own children like by themselves, because like let's be honest, Juno was jealous because she didn't need any, she wasn't needed, she wasn't wanted to have had any help. She wasn't like reached out, like she was pissed off because she's his wife and she wanted to have kids with him, but he wanted to have kids to his mind, which whatever. Juno wasn't getting it, but it is what it is. But I find it interesting because I feel like Juno giving birth to Mars, and then Jupiter giving birth to Minerva, which was the daughter that's purely from his mind. Those two, I feel like, are the true representations in my eyes of, like, not true representations, but they're a good representation of yin and yang. The reason being is because, for Jupiter to have given birth to his daughter, he had to have manifested her from his mind. He used his left brain to configure a person, while Vesta used flowers, used like plants, living things. She used the earth to be able to give birth to Mars. So it's like they all had this really interesting component to creating these children, and I'm not quite sure what Minerva's role is yet, or what she played a role in, or what she rules, or what she kind of concentrates her energy and her powers to. But Mars, he took that energy with the love of his mother, he gave back to the earth, and then he was also very aggressive. But everything from the very beginning was about go, was about the function of Mars, the action of men, the action of man, the action of doing, of masculine energy. And I feel like with Mars being so important in the birth chart, knowing that masculine energy is super important. Now, one of the things I wanted to say really quickly too is that masculine energy is not, because it goes into a next segment here about what is the general energy of Mars. Masculine energy is not just secluded to masculine or to male energy. It's not secluded to them at all. As a matter of fact, we as women have masculine energy. Men have feminine energy. And I don't know if last year was significant to anyone else, but for me, I've noticed very significantly how men have let their emotions kind of create imbalances with their masculine energy. Are the men too feminine? Is there such thing as being too feminine? Well, when it comes to certain sexes and the certain conditions and situations that apply to that person, it all varies. But I do feel like if there's a gentleman out there that feels more than the action of doing, if that makes sense, like they feel more than actually doing something, then it tells me that there may be something. I don't think there's something wrong with their masculine energy. I don't think there's something wrong with their feminine energy, but their need to be in that feminine energy speaks quite great volumes and needs attention for that. Same with ladies, same with women. If women's energy is primarily focused on the masculine energy, and she may not like, if she doesn't like that there, because sometimes there's ladies out here that don't mind the masculine energy, right? I'm kind of one of those ladies too, to some degree. Like, sometimes I don't mind it. Sometimes I do, because I do want to feel feminine. I do want to feel like I don't necessarily have to step up and be the balls of the situation, right? But that all depends on the circumstance. But then it says, it speaks volumes. What about your feminine energy that you're not connecting with right at this moment, that you're connecting with masculine energy? Now, the breakdown of masculine energy is pretty much the left brain, which is associated with logic, with analysis, consisting of facts and what's really there, what's tangible, what's physical. Like as far as masculine energy goes, I feel like it's in tandem with masculine and a feminine part. Really, it's in tandem with logic, swords, right? When we talk about astrology or talk about tarot, we have concepts. So we have swords, which is to do with our logic. We have earth to do with the physical, with what's real, what's tangible, what we can touch. Then we have all the feminine attributes that have a masculine and a masculine and a feminine attribute to them. That I also find interesting too. That consists of water and air, like water and not air, water and fire. So it's interesting because when you break up those two halves of the brain, you can kind of see how tarot in itself, which is why it's such an amazing tool. You can see why those elements, even broken up into two, have masculine and feminine parts, but they are both evenly masculine and feminine. It's weird, right? It's like I was saying, masculine rules the feminine and the masculine of what's physical, what's real, then logic. Then feminine energy would pick up water energy, which is emotion, as well as fire, which is expression. But action, expression, creativity, that's masculine in that eyes. But the thing is with the stereotyped masculine energy is that there is no creation that's derivative of the left brain. There's no creation that's derivative of it. It's the feminine. It's just the feminine. But there is a masculine version of the feminine energy. There is a feminine version of the masculine energy. There are so many ins and outs of it that, it's really, it captures yin and yang, which is what, like I said, I was going to go into. Now, I got this snippet from an article called "The Power of Masculinity" from Dr. Adrienne R. Pinkney. And I'm going to put the link in the description so you guys can read the whole article. It's very interesting. I suggest everybody to read that. And no, she's not promoting me or asking me to talk about her article live on stream. This is truly because I wanted to talk about Mars energy and how that kind of correlates with us as humans. So what she says here is yin and yang are often used to describe these false dichotomies, which with these false dichotomies means good, evil, bad, good, soft, hard, things that are supposed to be opposites when they actually are pretty much, they're very similar, actually, if not the same. The reason that these dichotomies are called false is because nothing is totally anything. Okay? Even when doing something good, a little evil could be present. Even when doing something bad, it could result in something good. Even though wood appears hard, there are soft parts to it. Like a pillow is understood to be soft, a little hardness is ever present. For this reason, the yin and yang symbol with the dot of the opposite element inside, which on the dark side, feminine, there is a white dot. So, like, if you notice, right, yes, the symbol of yin and yang is, there is a depiction of dark, light, but there's spots of good or light and dark in them. Because there's no such thing as something actually being 100% of that energy. Like, so when I break down what is masculine energy has feminine components to it. And I was actually thinking about how they had feminine components to it actually yesterday. And this is something I wanted to write because it was kind of coming out and it was like really, really interesting to me because it kind of brought some sort of thought processes up. And this is what I wrote. Mars in astrology has major attributes that can help us to better understand our personality traits. The attributes Mars favors is action, force, aggression, libido, and motive. Mars is the push, the expressor, the initiator. He goes first. It speaks to sex greatly as the act of sex is invasive, and which invasion and boundaries are ruled by Scorpio, whom, by the way, was traditionally ruled by Mars. So Mars was, if you look at Vedic astrology, because I believe they still use this in Vedic astrology, but don't quote me on it. Originally, when astrology started out, before we even knew about the outer planets like Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Pluto, before we knew all those planets, we had the personal planets to use. So those were shared with, so for instance, Mars had Aries, but he also had Scorpio at the time. So that passionate dark energy of Mars was accentuated in Scorpio. And it's not a bad thing, right? And the Scorpio energy is not negative. It's not bad. It's not bad as in the sense of negative. Negative in the sense of, right, it derives some sort of charge from it. There's something that they get, the energy that they get from it is a negative charge, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Actually, death is always considered bad, right? If you think about it in our society, when somebody dies, it's usually a sad thing. It's usually really bad, but it's not about, but we don't see that negative energy can also be used, or that energy is actually of celebration of that person's life as well, right? There's ways that you can turn your perspective or be subjective about energies, which is why when I say negative or positive, I'm strictly using the type of difference of the charges that they have, not the subjective view that it's usually put upon when someone thinks of negative and positive. So Mars is also the reaction we give people. That's the feminine aspect of Mars. One thing I have to say reigns true. Every energy has a mechanism in it that can conceive and receive data. Now, Mars isn't like Mercury, where messages is the name words and info are messages are the name words and info are the game. For Mars, the data he collects has a lot to do with physical exchange. Think about it. The Mars version of speaking, even the energy itself correlates directly to Neanderthals. And Jane, you're gonna like this, especially what I found out about how they correlate communication with, or how they how Mars communication actually is connected to Neanderthals. Actually, they speak, but words aren't their strong suit. It was the actions that were done that proved to be more effective means of communication than rather than growling, grunting, or screaming to some degree. As a matter of fact, research would suggest, and I have the resources here. This was written by Jennifer Viegas, and this was published July 11th, 2013. And this is NBC News, and the article was scientists say language might preserve Neanderthal talk. So, and the reason why they say this is because research would suggest that Neanderthals used tones to communicate with each other. A tone is made up with an inflection generated by the way your throat is positioned by the time sound goes through it, and through it you can feel the vibrations it can make. I'm not saying that Mars anyway rules speech. That's all Mercury, but I feel like every energy has a positive action, reaction, initiation, and negative They have a positive action, initiative, and a negative reaction, responses, and an effect. So, with Mars, with any energy, I feel like you have to take in tandem that feminine energy and masculine energy have masculine principles and feminine principles, and I feel like that's what we need to separate the two. But what are the masculine components of Mars, right? What is the breakdown of that energy? And with me explaining this breakdown of energy, this also helps to understand how when I look at your chart, pretty much see how you use your Mars energy from all areas, not just from the straight up masculine of the masculine, because there's not always just masculine. There's no pure masculine energy. There's always a masculine feminine. There's always a masculine energy with a feminine component. There's always a feminine energy with a masculine component to it. So the masculine portion of the brain is logic, calculation, to do with math, figuring things out, putting things in an orderly fashion, pretty much. It has clear motive. It has clear direction. It's not confusing. It's not creative. It's not eccentric. It is. It's just straight, narrow, boring. It's like a sheet of paper. It's blank as a sheet. It's as clear as day as a sheet of paper. You can't really add anything to it. It's just a sheet of paper. It is the noun of things. Think about it. Like I say noun, think of it, a dog, a cat, those things are very direct, and that's what I mean. There we go. Masculine energy is very direct energy. It's very direct. There's only one really one function to it. is the action and reaction. Libido, drive, energy, like the actual masculine energy is energy itself. It's energy itself. Because energy does something. Energy does something. And even the feminine principles to masculine energy, it does something. That being of reaction. Reaction is very feminine, is a very feminine principle towards masculine energy. And that is also what it rules too. It rules the reaction. It rules the action. It rules the direction and things that in which things go. Feminine energy, we will talk about that at another time. But one of the things I want to say is the contrast is it is creativity. It is the unknown. It's the mystery. It's the darkness. That's why we talked about Lilith first. We talked about Lilith first because she is, like, in a way, that masculine principle of feminine energy. Right now we're talking about everything to do with masculine energy. And then when we talk about Venus, the next episode, which is what I'm going to be taking up next, we're going to be talking about the feminine principles of the feminine energy and how that kind of correlates with the masculine principles of feminine energy too. So, what are Mars' strengths and weaknesses? And I don't actually think that there's a weakness or a strength. I honestly feel like there's two sides. Like I was saying before, the feminine principle and the masculine principle. We're going to get into that a little bit more. What are those principles? What are those principles? Well, let's talk about the masculine of the masculine principles, okay? Masculine principle with masculine energy. What does that look like? What are those attributes that people subjectively have given us to kind of view, to determine whether or not that's feminine energy, or that's feminine masculine energy or masculine energy. Okay, what is that? What is it like? Purposefulness. This is the masculine energy. Independence, self-confidence, self-reliance, adventurous, assertiveness, self-disciplined, determination, endurance, leadership skills, courage, loyalty, persistence, decisiveness, rationality, inventiveness, ambitious, dependable, provider, and worldly view. So open-minded, not restricted to one set of situation, like not set to one set of like views. Like you're open to everything, and that is very masculine because if you think about it, masculine energy, they don't determine what's right or wrong. That is the actual, and I say this as gently as possible, that is the feminine principle of masculine energy, to define what is and what isn't. Masculine energy does not define. Masculine energy doesn't have time to think about anything. If you think about it, like, why do you think it hates being in Virgo, or why it doesn't like being in Cancer, or it doesn't like being in Virgo? It really doesn't like being in Capricorn. It's because there's always some bit of analysis that comes to it, and even though that masculine energy is analysis, there is a feminine component to it that doesn't really give all of the masculine energy to Mars. There's a part of the feminine principle that Mars doesn't know how to work with properly sometimes. Like, and I say this in the sense of talking about Mars, the Mars concept specifically. So, like, where there will be challenges, not necessarily harmony, but there's a lot of challenges, because Mars is not someone that thinks, that's not someone that reacts emotionally. He is the response, but he's not in the reaction to a certain action, not necessarily coming from an emotional place. It's strictly doing something. So everything for Mars energy, positive Mars energy, is where there is no feminine affliction. No feminine principle afflicted in that, or accompanied with it, involved. But here is the negative concepts of Mars energy, or the negative energy of Mars, which has feminine principles to them. Arrogance. Self-confidence and arrogance are two different things. In the sense of self-confidence is self-assurance. You already know. You don't need to constantly prove it. Arrogance, it's kind of like, it's a sense of pride. It's a sense of feeling. It's a feeling. Pride is a feeling. So it's the blend of feminine energy with masculine energy. Feminine principles with masculine energy. Arrogance is the blend of feminine principles with masculine energy, which brings out arrogance. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having arrogance, but do understand that is attributed to a feeling. Pride is a feeling. You don't have a pride as in like nothing like literally think about masculine energy. If there's a emotion derivative from it, it's not masculine. If there's an emotion that you derive from it, that's not masculine. That's feminine. And you're like, what? What do you mean? How, like, if I want to do something and I do it, how is that masculine? Well, you're doing both. It's a blend of both. You're wanting it is the feminine energy that is inspiring the masculine energy to conduct action. And in this scenario with arrogance, your sense of pride of self is what's causing Mars to project that sort of feeling out to the world. And arrogance can be done in so many different ways. Arrogant, you can walk, you can talk, you can perform with arrogance. And it's how does one do that? Well, it's a special way. It's a signature. It's subjective, which is why it has feminine principles to it. Because there's no right or there's no certain way to determine, or there's no specific characteristics for arrogance. Like, it all plays differently for everyone else. So also, I wouldn't throw aggression into it because aggression is Mars energy. I can see how it can have masculine or feminine principles to it. Mainly because when you're aggressive, it could be because you are trying to achieve something. There is an objective that you are trying to get to. That is derivative of want or desire, which desire and want is feminine. Wanting anything is feminine. Egotistical, the sense of self, right? The feeling that you have about yourself. Risky behavior, doing something with adrenaline, like something that will derive adrenaline or will feel like you are like dancing, walking along the tightrope. Like, there's risks to those behaviors, but it's assessing the risk that gives it that feminine principle. What makes it risky? The definition of risky. What does that mean? Do you feel like those things could make you feel like you have lost something? Yes, like the actual physical losing of something is consequence. But having it to be a risky behavior, that is defining what the action is. Definition belongs to feminine energy. Definition belongs to, I believe it does. Because if you think about it, every conversation that you have with somebody, it always varies. There's everyone has a different interpretation of what a word means. So it all depends on how you see it. Callousness. Now, remember we were talking about worldview for masculine principled masculine energy. Well, for feminine masculine energy, callousness can be one of those things too, right? Because if you feel so certain about a certain way, you're not going to be interested in hearing someone else's point of view, right? If you believe that you're right, you're trusting your intuition, yourself, your inner self's information, then to go against outer information. And feminine energy is the intimate, is the inner, is the one that's enclosed. Masculine energy is exposed. So with feminine energy, the callousness meaning is, in my mind, when I think of callousness, I'm thinking of what are you not exposing yourself to? Because masculine energy is like, I'm gonna do whatever I want to do, and I'm gonna do it my way. I'm not gonna do it considering any other side. I'm not gonna consider any other options. And that means that person is completely inward and is trying to express inward outward what they're feeling inward. And so, don't get me wrong, feminine energy isn't horrible, isn't mean, but like the blend of them can actually cause either a negative charge or can be perceived as bad for people that are getting that information or receiving that sort of attitude. Non-communication, masculine energy is communication. So to not communicate, I don't even recognize that as masculine energy anymore, because unless it's a response to something. If you just refuse to not communicate, or if you've refused to communicate, then you are performing an action that would suggest heavy feminine principles. Explosiveness, another feminine principle applied to masculine energy. I mean, not applied, but combined and married with masculine energy. It's a feeling of suppression that then brings about the action of explosiveness, excessive pride, pretty much our arrogance, like we already talked about, sensitivity, insensitivity. And insensitivity is, again, trampling over other people's emotions. It's a feminine principle of being like, and it's interesting, feminine energy is also connected, is also referred to as connection, intuitiveness, and openness, but also feminine energy can be closed too. Like, there's periods and areas and times where feminine energy is open, and there's times when feminine energy is closed. Think about the menstrual cycle. There's a time when everything's closed, when the period starts, and once that period ends, we start up again, right? We're open for business. We're ready to start trying for kids. We're ready to start trying for babies. But then there is a period in time where we do have to shut down shop and start cleaning up our stuff. And I feel like when it comes to insensitivity, that is the feminine principle of the period. Closing up the shop. And think about it, when our body goes through that cycle, some of us, we have some serious cramps. Some of us, we don't have no cramps. But it's all perspective. It's all subjective. And I feel like with the insensitivity portion of it, this is the feminine principle of when to be closed. But insensitivity is not necessarily one that needs to be expressed or not. The choice of expressing insensitivity is masculine. The decision to take whatever you're feeling and express that is masculine. So insensitivity, in my eyes, is the closed portion of the feminine principle. Because we all have a closed portion. Even men, they have times when they need to kind of just stick to themselves, kind of keep it individual. Does that mean that that's a feminine principle? Hell yes, it does. Because we have to do things for ourselves. We have to be in tune to our own bodies and our own needs and our own emotional requirements. And emotional requirement is a big thing here because it emphasizes feminine energy. So insensitivity, to me, that is the use of feminine principles. So, I mean, I'm not going to go through all of them because I think I've been through a great deal, but you can see how nothing exists without the other. Truly, nothing. Not masculine energy alone, not feminine energy alone. There's a marriage between the both of them. There's a marriage between the both of them. So, how does this translate to Mars with love? How does Mars operate with love? What is that? What is the masculine component of love? Well, the masculine component of love, which love is an emotion, there's really no masculine component to an emotion, is the expression of that feeling. Like everything that we read before, callousness, arrogance, risky business, like insensitivity, those are feminine principles with masculine energy. That is the same thing. When emotions are playing a role, Mars has a role as well to represent the emotion. It's not the emotion itself; it's the representation of it. So, that means the like kissing, affection, hugs, holding hands, getting to know someone, getting information. That's also a sign of love because that shows like you're interested in understanding the person to have better connective energy with them, feminine energy. So how Mars plays a role is by invasiveness, decisiveness, persistence, loyalty, and the negative attributes to love that Mars throws in can be insensitivity. It can be arrogance or excessive pride. It could be a sense of closed-mindedness too. And the reason why closed-mindedness kind of plays a role in a lot of relationships really is because confidence, unfortunately, is attributed to knowing a lot and knowing everything. So when you have that sense of when you believe that the other person is attracted to you, a lot of the times, a lot of people, and I don't know if a lot of people or people with predominantly masculine energy sometimes can perceive them or project themselves in a way that kind of gives the idea that they know everything or they have a lot of knowledge, and the lack of knowledge can be seen. And I'm using like the idea of the original way that we used to connect with others, right? Which was like you have to, like, not you have to, but if you think about it, animals operate the same way, which is why I also titled this The Animal, which is like the human, the animal nature of it, which is like the bigger the hooves, the more likely you are to get laid. Right? The bigger your claws, the likelihood you're gonna get laid. The bushier your fur, the likelier you get made. You get laid. When you have situations like there's something lacking, like intelligence, or there's something like you don't have a lot of strength in your paws, or something like that. That kind of that's seen to the other person, to the feminine energy in which that masculine energy is trying to attract, as not a sufficient partner, or not someone that can be an effective partner, because masculine energy, as shown through or animal nature, is that the masculine energy has to show, or the masculine animal has to show dominance. It has to dominate, meaning it has to show stability. It has to show reliability. It has to show consistency as well. Now, a lot of the times, if we're not really in our energy, Mars, especially, like this, we'll talk about it too, we'll have hiccups where there's insensitivity, there's callousness, non-communication, sexual promiscuity. It's just the uncertainty of where you are masculine energy-wise. So, like with Mars energy and love, it's definitely something that we have to be careful of, because if we don't believe that we have everything that we need to attract the opposite sex, the feminine principles of masculine energy can kind of flood through, right? That means that whatever, because masculine energy doesn't have any attachment to emotions, feminine energy does. So your feminine energy is needing attention then, which would suggest that too, giving yourself that love, being appreciative to yourself, will then improve and balance your masculine energy. So there isn't an overflow of feminine principled masculine energy flowing out of you and creating a situation in your love life that isn't actually in tandem with what you want to do. So okay. So okay, well, I think, okay, cool, yeah, okay, cool. So I'm back. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, we're talking about Mars, with love and why men are so closely related to Mars. Well, like, I don't know if you guys have read the book Men Are From Venus, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Let me go ahead and rattle off the author of that book, which was John Gray. And he talks about how masculine attributes from the planets, like associated with the planet Mars, is directly connected to how and I think this is kind of just my perception of it too, because when I was reading the book, I was like, wow, it's interesting how he took the the ideas, the attributes from mythology, like Mars, for instance, masculine energy and such, like how he associated those with masculine, with men. And I feel like the problem with the idea that masculine energy belongs to men is that it just kind of completely negates that there is feminine attributes to men as well. There's feminine attributes to everything, and it completely kind of closes the door to the options that open up, or the doors that open up when you see everything, not just secluded from masculine energy, just to masculine energy. Men are masculine, more dominant in masculine energy than females are. Well, they can be, but it all depends on the makeup. It all depends on how they were born. It all depends on whatever they decide to be when they grow up. If they identify as male or female, it all depends on the circumstances of the individual. But the generalization that Mars has associating to men is inappropriate, because men also have feminine attributes, and their feminine attributes have come out as arrogance, aggression, egotistical, non-communicative, overly competitive. There's things that men are unfortunately trying to project through their feminine attributes that are not meant to be, not necessarily meant to be masculine, I feel, or they're not. Their direct way of healing has to do with feminine attributes. What leads men to insecurity, what leads men to being rash and harsh and callous and cold and detached, or and disconnected, is the feminine principle of closing. It's the feminine principle of closing. And why they act like that? Because they're not being loving and nurturing to themselves. They're not associating the feminine principle of love, nurturing, the mother aspect, to the parts of them that's closed. Which can kind of always feel like why men are always on their period. It's because that they're not giving themselves the feminine cure to the feminine issue. They're not treating the feminine issue with a feminine solution. Because I feel like, if you think about it, like, it's all math, right? If you think about it, like, the way to cancel out -5 is by adding 5. It goes straight back to 0. And it honestly kind of brings back the perspective of a friend of mine. She's queer in insight. I mention her all the time, where she said that the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. And if you think about it, 0 is indifferent. 0 has no, it's a number, but it has nothing to do with anything. It's just, it is. And 0 is the balance. 0 is the balance. So I feel like men are yes, they're associated with masculine energy because they are men. Masculine energy is the representation, or masculine energy is what gives man their male title, their masculine title. And it's so interesting to me, because if you think about words like malice and malware and such like that, in situations like that, like, why is male considered bad? Why is the mal word, mal, the suffix, bad? Why does that mean bad or evil? I feel like it's because of the feminine attributes that are associated with it. Like, for instance, feminine energy can be bad too with masculine components, which is, again, assertiveness, and can go both ways in my eyes. Like, you can be assertive, masculine or feminine. Assertive with your artwork, or you can just be assertive with yourself. right? It's not. I feel like feminine is the self, but it's not the self. While masculine is what is. It's the existence of what is. What is concurring. But I also feel like too that like Mal the bad is, or the assumption that together, that males and maleficence and such, those words, they're correlated in the sense of negativity, is to do with the impact that masculine energy has with feminine principles that are not being treated properly. Men need feminine love, as well as females needing masculine love. When we're too much of one sign, I feel like, or too much of one energy, there's a reason for it. There's compensating for what's ever lacking from their side that makes them be like that. And it's not like it's a diagnosis or saying that something's wrong with you. But if there is something that you find that is exhausting or frustrating, perhaps look at where your energy is mostly. What is your energy doing? What is the frequency of your energy? What is the direction in which your energy is going? So that whole spiel about Mars is how I use Mars in my readings and my chart readings. My information is in the description box below on how to hit a chart reading from me. But the use of Mars energies is not black and white. It has never been black and white. As a matter of fact, Yin tells us that nothing is black and white. Nothing is ever absolutely black and absolutely white. Nothing is pure of any of it. There's no such thing as purification. There's no such thing as anything being pure. Now, then you're going to be like, well, Scorpio rules purity. What does that mean? Well, the essence of a situation, like the pure core of something happening, or the pure essence of who you are. You have a purity. Energy does not. And I feel like the reason why is because you are the collage of whatever impurity, whatever impurified energy is the representation of you. So meaning, like, you have a little bit of masculine here, a little feminine there, a little bit of this here, a little that there. You are pure because you are all of you, and you can't help the impurities of the energy. Energies goes through each other, in each other, out of each other, for each other, with each other. It's crazy. So purity in the sense of energy doesn't exist. You can never have pure masculine energy. It's how you use that energy, and what principles that is associated with that energy that will define whether or not something can be used for its absolutely strict use. Otherwise, I don't believe it. I don't believe that masculine energy can be just masculine energy. I don't believe feminine energy can just be feminine. There's always both. There's always both. Alright, guys. So for this week, we have the Four of Cups. Okay. And the Four of Cups for me is talking about really analyzing who we are, where we stand, what we've been through, and what this means about us. What does this mean about us? Like we were just talking about how everything is not pure. Everything is not pure in our life right now. Everything is not all absolute of one thing. It's not absolute of another. It is a beautiful collage of crazy. But we have to figure out of that collage of crazy, how does this express who I am? Or what does it say about me? What do I want out of the collage of crazy? Because the possibilities are endless. Possibilities are endless. He could toss all three of these cups. He could toss one of the cups. He could toss two of the cups. He can leave the left cup alone and fill the other two up with wine. There's so many things that he could do with all of these, with the cups that he's got. But the cup that is not, I wouldn't say it's not being considered because it's out of his point of view. The person's bringing him the cup. I think this is a brand new cup. Is that perhaps the situation in which all this exists is there is something new that can come out of it. Like there's something new that you could aspire to or go for, or perhaps whatever you're working on may need a brand new direction that has really no basis for it, where it came from. Like, let's be honest, he's in a garage, pretty much. Like, he's in a garage trying to figure something out. He's got his tools and everything. But the problem I'm seeing is that we don't really know where that cup came from. We see this little kid coming in looking like, oh shoot, this poor dude, like, is he really going to want this cup? But the problem I'm seeing here is that this cup has no, it's not even a problem. It's significant to me that this cup has no derivative. It has no direct, like, where did it come from? Outside? Okay, where outside? It's like, I feel like there's something coming in for us this week, and we don't have a necessary basis for where it came from, but we just kind of have to, I feel like it's probably in our best interest to just try it and see. Be the masculine energy that wouldn't overanalyze and think about it, with, you know, be the masculine with feminine principles of it, of looking at the situation, not really having the, not necessarily letting our minds go into dissecting it, and just being like, you know what, it's there for a reason, it's here for me. Let me be what I am and use what I have to create what I want. You'll figure out the other pieces later. Because so far, like, the Three of Cups is telling you the past. It's telling you what you've gone through. It's telling you what you've already experienced. And that you don't really need a reason to experience something new because it's irrelevant for right now. It's an interesting message for this week. Absolutely. Especially with that Mars energy. And Mars, I believe, just went into Sagittarius. No, I think it's still in. It's actually I think it's. Okay, my iPad frustrates me sometimes, y'all. Let's see, Planet Watcher. Because I believe, yeah, Mars is still in Scorpio, so we still have that hard feminine principle with masculine energy right now. And it's honestly, like today, 18 degrees is the moon right next to Mars. So a lot of our emotional stuff is going to be sifted through. It's an intimate journey with this one, Four of Pentacles, Four of Cups, intimate journey. What action can you take without knowing the basis of it? Like without having any information, without having a solid clue as to whether or not this is something. Okay, y'all, I don't know why this is happening, but I am going to wrap this up now. But yeah, the concept of wishing is Scorpio. So yeah, I feel like whatever ideas that come out of the blue that's brand new, away from everything that you've already had experience with, if that comes up for you this week, I feel like be careful with the quickness to judge the situation, judge your dream. I would just try and see what it can provide. Going in without having all the information, being Mars ruled right now this week, having your focus be on what can I accomplish with what I do and don't know, or what can I accomplish just by being connected to myself, to being aware of what I am capable of doing. That's the biggest message this week, y'all. Next week we're going to talk about Venus. I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully we won't have as many technical difficulties this time as we did this time. So, love you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. My information is in the description box below. I will put the sources in the description box as well. Thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you guys next week. Take care, y'all. And until next time, I'll see you guys on the other side. Bye, y'all.